Well, looks like we are live. I'm so glad to be here to start this webinar organized by the Brazil Africa Institute. I'm glad as well to be among friends, among experts from many parts of the world to discuss and to talk about this important issue, which is affecting the world in general, but particularly where we are located. I'm here with my friend Otaviano Canuto. Otaviano, now it's a pleasure. Good to have you with us. Also, I'm with my friend Maria Nobre Cabral. Hope you are well.
Thank you.
Maria, she's right now in Guinea-Bissau, right?
Yes, exactly.
And Otaviano, you are now in Washington, as I understand.
Wow. Yes.
And me, I'm in Brazil. We are expecting to have the participation of Jean-Pierre from Senegal. I don't know exactly what happened, and I hope soon he can join us. The situation that we are facing now, it's very dramatic, I can say that. It's affecting people everywhere in the whole world. But in this discussion that we provoke, the idea is to see the situation in Africa. We're going to talk about the situation in the world, but particularly in the African continent. And it's not easy to describe the whole situation in just 1 hour. But my feeling is that after this discussion, some ideas will come up and we can have a better comprehensive idea and maybe some clues from this discussion could come and help even the decision makers, right? We have a very
Exactly.
big audience from many parts of the world, which is very good. And as we start to talk, I will mention some people, some participation that we have from many parts in Africa, in Europe, in Asia, in Latin America. So let's start now. So Otaviano, let's start with you, and also Maria. I remember this week I saw an interview from the
Yes.
former state secretary Harry Kissinger, and he said that the world order will change after the coronavirus. So just starting with this statement from Harry Kissinger, briefly, do you know or do you think that the world order will change after the coronavirus? Otaviano
Yes.
or Maria? With Maria,
Maria.
please, Maria.
I think it will change because the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, is very very dangerous situation, and it's catastrophic for humanity. And it's not. It is. Let's call it. It is a challenge, but it's a global challenge. And for the first time, the entire world is in one place. We all dealing with COVID-19, and I think it will change because it's affecting developed world, is affecting developing world, and all people are victim of this pandemic. So I think it will really, really, really change. I don't know if it will completely change as the statement of President Kissinger, but we will suffer a big change. The world is not going to be the same. That's my impression. It's not going to be the same.
What's your take, Otaviano?
Well, I fully agree with Maria. The world will not be the same. We're not going back to where we were. But there is a bright side and a dark side. So we are running into risks as well. Let me explain. The bright side is that the COVID-19 has shown clearly how some of the major challenges faced by mankind in the future will need some sort of a global concerted action among countries. By the same way that no one is able to think of a country solving by itself issues such as climate change or cybersecurity or the problems of demographic transition and so on, the global pandemics can only be faced as a joint effort. On the other hand, I'm afraid that immediately after the coronavirus crisis, we might see the reinforcement of some of the trends that we have watched in the previous years, namely deglobalization, countries closing into themselves, you know, running against trade, bringing back the search for self-sufficiency and so on. It doesn't help that we are watching this blame game taking place with countries blaming others for the virus as if the virus had nationality.
Exactly.
So I'm afraid with we'll have to work hard so as to make sure that the countries sit together and try to put in place the multilateral approach as in the past. As of today, for instance, we've been seeing this sort of a war among countries to grab ventilators, to grab medicines and so on. So this is the dark side of what we are watching. Hopefully, this will be, let's say, faced down.
Yeah, let me contribute with something, but let me also add another question or maybe a comment. The situation for the COVID, for the coronavirus, looks like at the beginning that is a health situation, but more than a health situation, I think it's more important for us to address the economic impact, the economic problem that the situation will bring for the world. We are in Brazil, and now we have a very big discussion about isolation against economic impact, and this is also coming from other places like Italy. Italy started very late to the lockdown, and I think this was something that was a wrong decision, right? In Africa, some countries are having lockdown. For instance, South Africa, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire. So the lockdown is something that the government it's have in their hands. But what's going to happen with the economy after the pandemic, as Maria mentioned? Maria, you've been Minister of Foreign Affairs of your country for a while, and you know how is to deal with the government, right? So, in your opinion,
Yes.
what should be the activity that the government have to do with the international leaders to see what could be the minimum impact, economic impact after the coronavirus?
I think it will be very catastrophic already because Guinea-Bissau in this moment is living is we are in an impasse, in a institutional impasse that the country is completely locked down, completely. We don't have. We have one of the candidates. We have one of the candidates to the presidency that took power by force. It's almost, we can call it a coup d'etat. So we don't, all the international community are not collaborating with Guinea-Bissau unless the Supreme Court pronounces the verdict about the dispute, the election dispute. So we are in this already. We are already with the problem, and then we have the COVID-19. Immediately, the borders were closed. all the flights were canceled. All the buses, taxis, transportation were also, stopped. The farmer markets closed. So in Guinea-Bissau, the population is very poor with the closing of the market, the farmer markets. It's closed, it's open like for 2 hours for people to go quickly and buy what is needed for the home. And then they come, and then it's closed by 11 in the morning. Opens at 8, closed at 11. So these people these workers at the bus, at the markets, and at the taxis, they are the primary providers for their household. So means that they are facing a problem of feeding themselves. So they are starving. If the state of emergency that the Guinea-Bissau declared, if it's not stopped, and if we have like 1 more month, we will have famine in Guinea-Bissau.
Okay,
that is a very negative part.
Yeah. Maria, let me just bring something that you raised specifically for Guinea-Bissau. But I'd like to hear the voice of Otaviano. And Otaviano, you've been vice president of the World Bank, the head of the Poverty Reduction and Economic Management. So you had some discussions how to bring possibilities of poverty reduction, right? And you had some conversation during your time as vice president of the bank, but also you may bring some ideas, not only specifically for the case of Guinea-Bissau, but how can you reduce poverty and how can we bring some efficient help? Because if you bring the mask, if you bring the ventilator, yes, it's very important. But what about next? What about the help that we need to bring to the poor countries?
Yes, João Bosco. Thanks for this question, which allows me as well to at least get a positive thing that may come out of this crisis where we are. Look, both of you have referred appropriately to the downside effects of social distancing policies. Particularly in any country where most of the labor is informal and doesn't have unemployment insurance, doesn't have leave with pay, and so on. But the question is, the historical experience with the 1918 flu pandemic showed clearly that cities in the US that adopted social distancing had less death and performed better than those that didn't do anything. On the other hand, social distancing policies cannot come by themselves because you have to accompany the social distancing policies with policies of transferring income to, let's say, the poor people. You must come with a package to provide credit to small and medium enterprise so that they can survive. You have to come with some support to subnational states, in the case of federations and so on. It's a catastrophe. And the only agent capable of providing an insurance against the catastrophe is the public sector, even if that means a lift in the public debt. It has to do that. What scares me is the adoption of social distancing policies in some African countries without simultaneously providing some sort of support to those poor people, particularly those who live in slums. And by the way, in any country, as it is the case of Brazil and most African countries, the proportion of the population living in slums make it really hard for coronavirus or other similar problems by simply social distancing. Now, the reason why I'm saying that a lesson can be taken is the following. In each of these countries, an effort must be made to register, to have some sort of a central database about their poor people. It's what we call that in my time at the World Bank, knowing the poor by the name, so that not only in the future we might get to minimum income policies, but also because in situations such as this one, it becomes easier to reach those people and give them some support. Brazil, for instance, has benefited from the fact that it has a registry, a national registry, that includes those people who receive conditional cash transfers, but also now it's being broadened to include some other informal employees and so on. So in each and every country in Africa, some efforts in that direction should be put so as to know the poor by the name, as we used to say at the World Bank, because it complements in terms of basic income to allow the survival of the poor people in times such as the social distancing policies is fundamental in order to have the success of the combat against any virus. That's a major takeaway that we could carry. And by the way, is there any alternative to social distancing policies? Yes, but the alternative requires a degree of government capacity to use technology, as well as it requires a dissemination of technology with the population, so that everyone in the country has one thing like this, so as to allow to do as countries like Singapore, Taiwan, China, uh, Korea, South Korea, and China itself in the second stage did, which is track, monitor, and confine people selectively. But in order to do that, you have to have a degree of dissemination of technology with the population, as well as the government capability. Not having that, the only way is to implement social distancing so as to flatten the curve of infection and avoid the overwhelming of critical care capacity, which is something very scarce in poor countries. So we have to move to a world in which the countries know their poor by the name.
Yes.
You are mute, Jumbo.
I'm having a problem. I cannot hear. I hear a lot of voices wrong.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
I hear.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Sometimes
Thank
the
you. Thank you.
yeah. Thank you.
I couldn't hear the brilliant intervention of our brother Canuto.
Thank you very much for your
I was making a lot of efforts.
Yeah, but do you hear now, Maria?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You too, Otaviano, do you hear well?
Yes.
Very good. So I was mentioned that we have some audience that I want to greet. We have people from Tanzania, from Nigeria, from Canary Island, from Portugal. It's very good to have you with us. So be ready for your questions, your comments. You can send to directly to the channel of YouTube, and we can send to our speakers. I remember almost 1 month ago, the Director General of WHO, the African Ethiopian Tedros Adhanom, he said that Africa should be prepared for the worst. When he said that was just after he mentioned that the pandemic was a reality, right? When he raised this statement, something very sad came to my mind. If the one gentleman from Africa said that Africa should be prepared for the worst, what should be the worst? But also, this brought me some personal thinking, and this was one of the idea to have that kind of discussion. How Africa would be ready to be impacted with the worst situation without the commitment of the international society. But you mentioned something very important, Otaviano, about technology, and I could say technology and cooperation, right? The countries that you mentioned, South Korea, China, US, the European countries, they should be on board in that discussion about the statement that the Director General mentioned about the worst that is coming for Africa. So far, the numbers in Africa are not so, I don't say bad, but I consider that the number is not so dramatic. But without
Yes.
efficient system and economic system, maybe what he said will come. So how possible will be for the countries of Africa with some weak economic situation receive some cooperation from other countries who already passed from the wars. You are now in US, Otaviano, and the numbers in New York, California are very high. You live in Europe, Maria, and you know that Portugal also reached some important numbers. Again, can you bring some ideas how Africa could receive enough help or support from the, let's say, the rich countries? Maria, please.
I think by more than ever, Africa needs help. And to inspire not only in the Ebola outbreak 2014, but also to inspire in other actions that like countries like China fight the pandemic. We saw in the media that there is discipline that helped a lot the Chinese to fight the COVID-19. Everybody, they didn't close the commercial establishments in Hong Kong. Everybody was using the masks. It seems that the masks are very, very important utensil to fight this virus. And practice also social distancing is very important. I think if everybody collaborates in this sense, we need financial resources to also to do the interventions. We cannot only have the masks and say that we need, but it is calling for us for very massive actions to fight this virus. It's not that it's not that easy that we can see it, because it seems unreal. It's when we are at home and you know that we cannot socialize, we start panicking, because we start feeling that something is really wrong with the world. Where are we going to? That is the question. Where is the world going to? So this is so serious that it calls for again a global reach all the countries, and African countries that already has problems, that faces a lot of other problems, has to think twice. This is an opportunity because the COVID-19 is even testing the international development, let's call it cooperation. It's challenging. It's a test, and the ability to respond to the COVID-19. It's really a very serious challenge for the international cooperation. As our topic is an economic cooperation, but the international cooperation is also economic cooperation. So this is a very stressful test for the world to show solidarity and being together and thinking in things that are more important for us than the wars. Maybe the light side, like our brother Canuto was saying a while ago, he has also negative sides, dark sides, and they also has a positive side. And one of the positive sides is to rethink that the budgets, that the money that the international community puts in armament should be put in health and more technology, and contribute to that at least the world is prepared for anything that comes, because if it affects Africa, if this COVID-19 affects Africa, if it's not treated, it can bounce back to the developed world. So it is a concern for all of us. This is really serious. It is concerning every human being that is living in the planet Earth.
Maria, you mentioned something very important, and I think Otaviano can also add something. What's happening in Africa now, and I'm talking as someone who travels to Africa very often, and I see that what is affecting Africa now, what is happening in Africa, and what's going to happen later in Africa could affect the whole system. And now I come back to the statement of Harry Kissinger. The world order will change, and I agree with him. I don't know the whole picture, but I think it will change, the whole order, the world order. But if we do not have a important lens for the African context, what's going to happen in Africa, even economically, will affect other regions. And then in this regard, I think, and I'd like to have your impression, Otaviano, in this sense, if we do not help Africa immediately, not only bringing masks or ventilators, but what about the next movement? Because Africa is one of the resources, natural resources that the world needs. If the industry, the whole situation in Africa doesn't change or is badly affected, this will bring negative effect as well for other regions. So just for you to think about as well, and let's put more discussion in this topic. Otaviano.
All right. Okay. João Bosco. In fact, and Maria is right, there is the cooperation through physical delivery of goods, equipment, masks, and so on. But we also have to take into account that the coronavirus has brought a perfect storm on Africa. A perfect storm.
Yes.
Even before coronavirus landed in Africa, it already brought shocks from the previous place where it had ravaged. remittance, which are so important for some developing countries and in some African countries, have fallen because the immigrants outside are being fired. Tourism has come down. We know of how the parks in Kenya, for instance, are all they're idle and so on. And the commodity price have declined dramatically.
Yes.
And money has disappeared from the markets. Not only emerging markets have seen strong capital outflows, but also frontier markets in Africa that were relying on this sort of a finance are facing, a drought. Just to give an idea, the International Institute of Finance, which tracks the flows of capital to developing countries as a whole, estimated that since February, of this year until now, $100 billion left in emerging markets. And in the poorer countries in Africa, they also are facing a drought of refinance of their debt, and which makes things even more difficult. So if we are to have the African countries implementing the policies that I mentioned, complementary to the social distancing, one has to find ways to put money into Africa. Which leads me, this is concrete. It's not necessarily simply an appeal to solidarity. We have this week the first ever virtual meeting of the Development Committee of the World Bank, the gathering of ministers, and the IMF and spring meeting as well, due to coronavirus. Now, these institutions like the G20 have to go beyond what the IMF and World Bank have announced so far. The Kristalina Georgieva, the managing director of the IMF, said, I believe, last Friday, that 98 countries have requested emergency financing associated to coronavirus. And $100 billion have been, let's say, made possible for that. But we need more than that. We need to have some type of moratorium, some sort of debt standstill. So for some time, let's say, the IMF and World Bank made this call, suggesting official bilateral creditors to suspend the debt service to those countries, to the more vulnerable, the poorer countries. But it could go beyond that. It could include, there's a standstill, also the private creditors, because as we know, a substantial part of the recent indebtedness in Africa has been with the private creditors. Africa needs, a substantial part of African countries need some sort of debt standstill so as to have the fiscal space to do the policies complementary to the social distancing that I was referring to. So if we want to have international cooperation, then push forward in this agenda. And we have the virtual meeting of the IMF and World Bank this week. Let's hope that this call for debt relief is taken seriously by these institutions. That would be the complete way to demonstrate solidarity.
I'm so glad that we came from Vietnam, from north of Africa, with us, which is very good. So looks like Otaviano, your voice, Maria, are being very, very clear, and people are sending us some questions that I will raise soon. There is one thing that I'd like to mention to both of you. There is another crisis that will come to Africa, which is the food crisis, which is a consequence of what is going to happen,
Yes.
what is happening now. So there is no food production. The borders are closed. So if you go to the situation, for example, of Ghana, Ghana imports 70% of the rice that the country, the consumption of the country, which is very big. Nigeria, 200 million people, you have more than 40% of importation of rice as well. So after the crisis, the coronavirus crisis, something should be discussed about food production, food consumption, right?
Yes.
And food security. So without food, without food in our tables in Africa, we will face a very dramatic crisis. Otaviano, you mentioned vulnerability, and you mentioned two things that I'd like to put together. Besides the food crisis, what about the tourism? What about the commodity that you mentioned? Without something very specific for a specific areas, we will have other problems. We are facing now a pandemic, a health situation, very important, very ordinary situation. But we need to see, and that's my suggestions for us to think in the time that we still have, how possible it will be for the countries to fix the domestic problems that each one of the country have in the African context, to avoid other crises besides the one that we're facing now. Food crisis and commodity crisis, and also some important economic initiative that each country has. Let me just put something for the north of Africa, which is very important, the tourism in Egypt, Algeria, Mauritania, Morocco. How possible, for example, the tourism in that region could be, let's say, in the next step, will receive benefit. You mentioned the moratorium from the IMF, for example.
Not the IMF, João Bosco, not the IMF.
Okay.
The IMF
okay.
and the World Bank are suggesting that the governments who have credits with the poorer countries, that they provide a standstill. And I, like many others, are suggesting that this debt standstill will also done by private creditors. It's not necessarily the debt with the IMF and World Bank is small.
Yeah. So the private direction, you think could be one of the solutions?
You know, look, the solution to the problem is in implementing policies to deal with the social impact of the healthcare policies and so on. The things that I'm referring to, they are the means to the end, which is to provide fiscal and financial space for the governments of these countries to implement the policy.
Exactly.
That's what the countries need. They are suffocated by the other dimensions of this crisis. As I said, this is a perfect storm. You have, besides these countries having to do to deal with their inflation curve, with their recession curve domestically, they are also facing shocks from abroad. They are part of the same story because the commodity prices have fallen because of the coronavirus crisis in the outside. Remittances are falling because of the coronavirus crisis in the countries where the poor countries in Africa have migrants. The tourism has fallen because of the coronavirus.
Exactly.
And let's be realistic. Before things are perceived as really, really, really under control, there's not going to be a return to tourism.
Exactly.
This is a big shock. It is also a shock of confidence. People will have the traditional source of tourism to the countries in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, North Africa as well. The source of tourism will remain dry until there is confidence that the coronavirus is not there spreading out. So let's be realistic. What we have to do as of now is to help these countries manage the crisis. That is to say, minimize the damage, the pain inflicted their poor people.
Yeah. Maria, your take.
Yes, I cannot hear well.
Okay,
There
do you
is
hear me?
repetition of.
Otaviano, maybe you can turn your mic off, please.
Yes, everything.
Otaviano.
I tried everything, but I can follow.
Okay.
I understood very well.
Okay. So you want to raise something, Maria, about this? Okay. So let me, Maria, do you hear me, Otaviano?
Yes.
Are you listening?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay. So what I ask you, Maria, do you have any concern or any idea about what Otaviano mentioned about the apocalyptic
what I understood is that it's not only the COVID-19 is not only affecting the food sector, the health sector, but also the tourism sector. Actually, is affecting everything, and fiscal measures needed to be taken for Africa. So
yeah.
I understood that part, it is real, because there will be no tourists visiting any place. So
okay,
it will be completely closed if this situation gets worse. If it gets worse.
Yeah, let me now give the opportunity to put some questions that our very important audience are sent to us, right? So there is a question now. A few days ago, the World Bank said that sub-Saharan Africa is facing the first recession in 25 years as a result of the pandemic. Security crises are coming. This is the question. What countries are in risk, and what should be done? Good question.
Yeah. Let me say a bit about it. Definitely, the African countries that have incurred in debt in the previous years are facing a huge drama. I have in mind Angola. Mozambique is also facing huge difficulties on that front. And Nigeria, because of the downfall of the oil price, which is something quite important for government revenues and so on. But overall, no one can be said to be safe from the impacts of the coronavirus crisis. Because even the African countries that are importers of some commodities, they are facing falls in revenues of other sources. So no one can claim full safety. Even the countries that have been performing macroeconomically well in the previous years, like Ethiopia, like Kenya, and so on. Kenya is feeling the impact of the slowdown in tourism and so on. So everyone has been affected by the coronavirus crisis. No one is safe. No one in the planet.
All right, Maria. Let me address you a question that is coming now regarding the role of the African Union for this pandemic, right? So we have a international organization where we have all the countries of Africa combined. So what do you think? And again, you had the experience to represent Guinea-Bissau as Minister of Foreign Affairs. In this discussion, what do you think it will be the role of the African Union, not to solve, but to contribute to bring solutions for the pandemic?
I think that all actors acting for the solution of the COVID-19 should sit around the table to find urgent solutions to the pandemic. And the African Union should be part of these actors that will decide about what to do with the pandemic situation. African Union have a very important role in this in the solution of to bring some contribution for the solution of the COVID-19.
Okay. There is another question, and it's good to have the audience participation. And I have a question now with a good friend of IBRAF, friend of Brazil Africa Institute, with Professor Paulo Spella. Thank you, Professor Paulo, for your contribution. And he's asking something very important, and I'd like to address it straight to you first, Otaviano. What is the role of the civil society organizations such IBRAF and others, right, to bring initiative to discuss among other regions such European Union, Latin America, and Africa as well, to solve the problem of Africa specifically. So we have the civil society, many organizations spread in many places. We need to see what contribution the civil society can bring to the solution, or to bring solutions to the African pandemic. What do you think?
Well, João Bosco, frankly, there is a huge role to be played by civil society organizations in awareness, in advocacy, pushing for the adoption of solutions, and such as the ones that I mentioned. But also, we should take into account the role that civil society organizations have been playing on the ground. Let me give you examples from Brazil, where in some places in Rio de Janeiro, some slums, the neighborhoods and the small gatherings of people have been functional in order to help the government, for instance, in mapping out their poor people, have been important in, let's say, counseling the population and keeping them, to the extent of possible, safe at home, and so on. So the civil society organizations, they can play a role at all levels. It's not only gathering in nice places and making statements. It also has an important role to play on the ground.
Very good. Maria, I think your microphone is off. Maria, do you hear me? Looks like, Maria, please try to turn on your microphone. Yeah, looks like Maria is having a problem with the mic. While she's bringing the phone on, maybe we can, Maria, your phone is not working. Turn on your mic. I know sometimes we have to deal with this technology. Okay, Otaviano, while Maria is trying to fix, there is another issue, and I think we had this discussion before about South-South cooperation. We are Brazil, we are in the south. Africa is in the south as well. So how possible is the South-South cooperation strategy or platform could be a path to bring not the solution, because again, the solution is not easy to bring in one single discussion, but how possible is for the South-South cooperation initiatives and platform to raise possibilities of solution. Maybe some good cases, good examples that we see in one specific country can be applied or deployed in other places. What do you think? And I know you are an expert in South-South cooperation and you are enthusiastic in this issue as well.
I would say, João Bosco, that sharing experience is a good way to cooperate in this case. It's not money, but it is on sharing the lessons learned in dealing with the common issues such as poverty, misery, and so on. In this case, likely the North has less to give in terms of knowledge acquisition and knowledge sharing than the South. The social policies, for instance, in Brazil, have been acknowledged. They are far from perfect, but and Brazil has many problems. There's still a large swath of the population living under poverty, not misery, but poverty. But the fact of the matter is that things have become easier to deal with after the country developed the registry and the national conditional cash transfers. Brazil has a lot to provide in terms of technical assistance to African countries, other southern countries, that opt for adopting similar policies. I would say that cooperation, South-South cooperation, is mostly a matter of cross-learning.
Yeah, I like too much what you're saying about this discussion about South-South cooperation. We are now coming to the end of our time. I'm just thinking that Maria is having a difficulty to conclude and to be with us. Maria, are you there? Your microphone looks like, well, as we are coming to the end of this discussion, I don't want to take longer. I'd like to once again thank you the opportunity to be with Otaviano and Maria Cabral. Otaviano, you have maybe 2 minutes to bring your final ideas. As I said, this is maybe an apocalyptic moment that we face, but I always see that we can see some hope. What hope you see at the end of the day in this situation?
I would hammer on one thing. The major takeaway, or one of the major takeaways from this experience, which is the establishment of policies by governments in all poor countries, including in Africa, to know their poor by the name and to establish schemes, systems, policies to support the poor, either via direct transfers of money or other forms of support, collecting information about education and health needs at a very retail level. This is something that hopefully the necessity of which will become clear as we go through this perfect storm that has ravaged, it's starting to ravage Africa.
Very good. Thank you for your final words, Otaviano. I'd like to thank you all the audience, the participation that we had from many places, many countries, not only in Africa. And let me say that this program was recorded, and we can see many times as we like during the next days. So once again, thank you very much, Otaviano, for your time. It was a pleasure to once again hear your voice, your wisdom, and I know the contribution that you brought to us. It's important for other initiatives that we can have. I would like to thank you, Maria. I know you are facing some problems of communication, but I know that you are there. Unfortunately, we could not have Jean-Pierre with us. Sometimes the technology is not that helpful. So once again, thank you very much. And hopefully this small contribution that Ibrahim brought to us will be something that people can use. Thank you very much. See you soon.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, João Bosco. Till next time.
Till next time.